Hello, my name is Jerry Pujals, and this is my presentation on the positive and negative effects that video games have on people's mental states, and then determining if it's ethical or not. This presentation will look at video games to determine their ethicality and benefit to society by how they affect people. Throughout the presentation, I intend to cover the positive and negative effects that video games have on people, look at those effects through the ACM standard of ethics for programming, and then form a general idea on the overall effects that video games have on people. The reason I chose the ACM standard of ethics is because under all the art assets and visual screens, video games are programs like any other. By the end of the presentation, we'll see that video games can have different effects on people depending on what type of game they are playing. The positive effects of video games. Studies have shown that action video games have been able to improve players' reflexes and reaction times, so they could do stuff like this. Okay, maybe not stuff like that, but pretty close. A study in the University of London has shown that people who play video games are able to increase their mental flexibility, or in other words, their ability to multitask and problem solve at the same time, allowing people to do stuff like this. A more realistic goal for us mere mortals. These effects that come from video games are proportional to the difficulty of the game, as well as the pace and amount of thought required to put into it. Video games have also been shown to be a method of relieving stress. Viewing the benefits of games from the ACM standard of ethics. The multitasking and problem-solving skills gained from playing video games do in fact contribute to society and human well-being. A direct result from these skills is people being more productive and ultimately benefiting society even more. Also, by relieving stress, video games contribute even more to human well-being. The negative effects of video games. For as long as there's been something to destroy in a video game, people have claimed that video games make players antisocial and desensitize them to violence, leading people to do things like this.
Ey, das will schon wieder sein. Alter! So, ey, nicht an, Junge!
Or things like this.
Don't hit.
Viewing the detriments of games from the ACM standard of ethics. Looking at the side effects that video games have, psychologist Gregory West has also claimed that he could link Alzheimer's disease to playing video games, although it still needs some more research. Viewing the detriments of games from the ACM standard of ethics. Looking at the effects that video games have on people, video games can also be a hindrance to society and human well-being due to their effect on players' health. Also, the sense of reward from playing video games that lead to addiction ultimately detriments society by making video game players less productive. As shown earlier, violent action video games cause players to become more competitive and on edge, causing them to be stressed out and retracting from their overall well-being. While there are many negative effects from playing video games, they're not as drastic as one may first be led to believe. This graph shows a relation between video game sales and violent crimes over the years. Many claim that video games, especially violent ones, ultimately lead to violence in the United States. However, this is not entirely the case. The graph clearly shows, as video game sales have risen over the last 20 years, violent crimes has dropped dramatically. The reason for this is because even though some video games are violent, they're not realistic enough to imitate in real life. Every video game, including those that strive for realism, cannot truly emulate reality. The best example would be the Grand Theft Auto series, which many claim is the biggest contender for bad influences on children. The Grand Theft Auto series, although trying to strive for realism, is still a video game like any other. As a result, it cannot truly be linked to reality and ends up leading to interactions like these. The wacky and over-the-top situations that video games have and that draw players towards them is the reason why video games don't really influence reality. The situations that people would not normally be put in their normal lives is the reason that people play video games. And for the most part, this desire is supplemented by video games, filling players' needs for an action-packed adventure. Conclusion. Video games can be seen to have positive and negative effects for people. As a direct result, it could be argued that either video games are ethical or unethical for people to play. Some games, like violent video games, are more unethical than others, as they have more harm towards human well-being and ultimately society. There are also other games, like real-time strategy games, that could be more ethical for people to play because it benefits them more. In the end, every video game is different and have different effects on people, making it hard to overall assess the ethicality of video games. It is case by case, with some games being more ethical than others. This is Jerry Pujals, and I thank you for listening.